Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Hope you're doing great. My name is Allison Elsner, and I'm the CEO of Inland Wellness Information Network in San Bernardino County Medical Society. We are so excited to have you here with us today for the first of 6 Food, Health, and Cultura Latinx conversations. And I'm really excited to welcome a true pioneer in this field with us today and the program director for this series, Dr. Angie Romero Neeson. Dr. Neeson is a quadruple board certified physician who's passionate about advancing health equity by amplifying the expert voices in medicine, where health, nutrition, culture, and lifestyle medicine can intersect and advance chronic disease management in a culturally adaptable manner. Dr. Neeson, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming and welcome to the first of 6 webinars. I'm going to go ahead and advance my slides so you can get the CME if you registered for the CME. We will also give these instructions at the end if you missed it. I just briefly want to introduce my amazing Latino colleagues who are here with me today. Dr. Sandra Indacochea Sobel is a triple board certified endocrinologist, obesity medicine, and lifestyle medicine certified physician. She is a CEO at Summon Health in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Dr. Antonio Miranda is not only a registered dietitian and diabetes educator, but also the world's expert on Latino health behaviors, specifically on machismo studies. He is a national speaker and consultant and works with many health experts while residing in the greater Dallas area. Dr. Robert Graham, also known as Dr. Rob the Chef, is the only Latino physician chef I know. He wears many hats, including being Chief Health Officer at Performance Kitchen and co-founder of Fresh Medicine. He is also a director of integrative medicine at Catholic Health, where he sits at the intersection of food, integrative medicine, and public health. And lastly, Dr. Sonia Ponce is a San Diegan like myself. She has a master's in public health, where her research projects on Latino health, lifestyle behaviors, and preventative cardiometabolic health meet. She is the owner and founder of her community cardiology practice, where she continuously focuses on empowering her Latino patients with culturally appropriate lifestyle changes. And here are the many objectives. We have 3 here, but these are going to help you explore a variety of different ways, habits, ingredients, food preparations that incorporate the Latino tradition and heritage so that you can engage and empower healthier living. I just want to bring light that when I say Latino, it includes Latinas, Latino, Latine, and Latine heritage is a global term, but many of us may still call ourselves Hispanic, Latino, Spanish heritage, but we really are not all the same. In fact, some of our speakers today are here in bold, and as you can see, some of us are from different parts of Mexico. But even within the Latino culture, there's an incredible heterogeneity and cultural diversity. But the truth is, we are all here because we are all statistics in the United States. Did you know that there are only 12.7% of all registered dietitians who are Latino? And 6.1% of physicians are Latino, and us women here included, 2.4% are Latina. 8.6% of all endocrinologists are Latino. 4.2% of all cardiologists are Latino. And lastly, for those who hold a PhD, like Dr. Miranda, only 1% are Latino. So this is important to me to highlight the voices of Latino experts in medicine and research when it comes to making sure we serve our communities authentically. Because when it comes to Latinos, we make up almost 20% of the US population. And as you can see, this is a huge mismatch in research and medical fields. So I want this to be a little bit of an engaging conversation. We're going to throw a poll here. How many of you have heard of the Latino epidemiological paradox? Let's see. Janice, are you able to throw the poll?
Allison, you may have to do that too as the main host.
Okay. Let's do that.
I hate to tell you this, Janice, but I don't know how to do that. I didn't prepare for that. I'm so sorry.
No problem. At the bottom, there's a
Okay. Got a couple of respondents, good. Wait for everybody.
Maybe for now, until we figure this out, they could just put the responses in the chat, because.
I'm getting it.
Oh, you're doing it? Okay, great.
Okay, 20, 28. All right, we're gonna end it. Okay, good. All right, well, we got some learning to do. Okay, so for 40 years, researchers have not been able to explain why Latino Americans live longer than white Americans, despite having far less income, less access to healthcare, higher rates of diabetes, and obesity. So let's get into this. Why should we all care? Okay, well, we should all be paying attention because, as you can see, that blue line, Latinos are the fastest growing population of Americans. We're currently at 19% of the population and are projected, we're adding about 1 million US births every year. And I want to make sure that everyone knows that this is the fastest growing population in the US, not because of immigration, because as you can see on the right, immigration rates have been decreasing over the last 25 years. And we're still having a growing Latino population due to US born Latinos. So if we begin to dive deeper, this epidemiological paradox, if we look at the last 40 years, let's see, are you guys able to see my slide? I don't know, something happened here. Let's do technical difficulty. I pressed the wrong button. There we go.
I can't see the video.
Can't see the video.
Yeah, I don't know why.
I can see the slide, Dr. Neeson.
Okay. You can't see the slide?
I can see it. Can anybody else see it? Yes.
I can't.
Yes.
I don't see anything.
Sounds like most people are seeing it.
Okay. All right, let me go back to the. Is someone advancing the slides accidentally? No?
I can't see anybody.
Let me just, oh, let me start it again. I'll do the share again just to see if we can open it up. Sorry about that. Okay. Are you able to see that it's loading?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so if we can see the last 40 years, we compare the US to other high-income countries, we can see that the United States has definitely lagged behind when it comes to life expectancy. Obviously, during the pandemic, we know that there was a lot of political environment, and so we lost a lot more lives, greater in proportion to our communities of color. The advancing part is hard. Okay, but if we take a look at the United States in 2019, the life expectancy for Latinos was 81.9 compared to whites, which was 78.8. That means that Latinos on average lived about 3 years longer. And if we want to see this in a graph, let's take a look at the different states. So take a look at all the different states, and you can see that this trend in the most populated Latino states, you can see the same trend except for New Mexico, which Dr. Ponce will talk about. She trained there. Well, let's take a look at the top 10 causes of death in the United States. The top 2, heart disease, cancer, okay? Well, how does that fare for Latinos? Let's take a look. This is all data from the CDC. You can actually go to the CDC and take a look at this. Take a look at the yellow line. This is for heart disease. So Latinos on average have a lower heart disease than non-Hispanic whites. And what about different states? Let's take a look at the gray bar. These are Latinos. Again, this trend, you still see that in almost all the other states.
Oh.
What about cancer? Let's take a look at cancer. Second most common, we're still almost at the bottom. Lowest rates of cancer, lower rates of cancer. And let's look at the different states. Again, the gray bar. In all the states as well. So when we start to take a look at the number of COVID-19 deaths, because I know you guys are going to say that, what about COVID-19? Yes, we do see that. But if we really look at these chronic conditions and we can say, wow, I can lower somebody's heart disease rate or cancer rate by 30%, I think that the real intervention should be how many more Latino friends can you make so that you can actually lower your risk of heart disease and cancer. But as you can see, we're going to go through the COVID numbers. 2020, 2021, those were pretty hard years. Those were our toughest. But as you can see, Latinos are turning the corner on COVID. It's trending back to where it was. And even during COVID, the life expectancy did go down, but it was still remained higher than non-white, non-Latinos. So let me switch gears a little bit for a moment. I want to talk about the Latino GDP. So I'm going to launch another poll, and I want everyone to let me know if they have heard. Let me go this one. Have you heard of this Latino GDP? Give everybody a couple more minutes. Okay. Perfect. We've got some learning to do. Okay. So the GDP is the total economic output. This is kind of like the health for the economy and how it's measured. And if you take the Latino GDP, it has been calculated in 2021 at 3.2 trillion. So one of the misconceptions is that Latinos are a drain on our healthcare system with high rates of obesity and diabetes. However, let me give you a little bit of food for thought that this health and robust nature of our economy is mainly due to the Latino workforce. If you take Latinos as the GDP and you compare it to China and India, we are actually the third fastest growing GDP in the world. And when we take a look at the last 75 years of labor force participation rates, this is not new to us because we as Latinos know, and many of my colleagues here too, that the hard work ethic instilled by our parents who came here as immigrants and gave us the ganas, the ánimo required to do a job decade after decade is still present today. And even during the pandemic, we can see that things closed and it dipped a little bit, but it relatively remained stable. And so when we take a look at everything holistically, we can see that a communicable disease is very different from a chronic disease. This data shows us that in 2020, Latinos were #1 for COVID-19 deaths, a communicable disease because the Latinos were traveling, they were working at the front lines, they were coming home, they were living in multi-generational homes. This was a mistrust. This was not properly equipped with proper PPE. Latinos are twice as likely to be uninsured and on average earning less income and more likely to be food insecure. And when they are food insecure, they're less likely to ask for help. And as you can see, we're not changing the representation in research and medicine. So there's a trust and there's a mismatch there. And we need our population and our doctors and our researchers to reflect the local, state, and national demographics. So I just want to leave some food for thought. When I learned about this paradox and the growing Latino GDP that is the backbone of our country's economy, what would the health of our country look like if we actually invested in the health of Latinos through research and medicine? What would that life expectancy look like? And I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Sonia Ponce because she has a little bit of some nuances throughout this with her experience.
Thank you, Angie. Hi, I apologize. I don't have access to my camera here, so I'm going to have to stay in the dark for at least for this talk. I promise to be better prepared for the next encounter we have. I am going to echo a lot of the concepts and ideas that Dr. Neeson has already presented to us. And a lot of this is based on personal experience and research experience. I want to emphasize this big theme of diversity among the Hispanic population. And I want to clarify that diversity of the Hispanic population is not just related to the country that we might come from, as that beautiful map of Latin America that we saw at the beginning of the presentation shows. Latin America is a huge geographic territory. And I have to get this off my chest. The term Latino or Hispanic is an incredibly ambitious term to try to group us all together in there, because we know that even though we do share a common language and some cultural beliefs and ideas and customs, there is so much diversity within all of us. Now, if we do think about country of origin, I was able to pull out some data to help us understand what is the breakdown of the Hispanic population in the US. And as you can see, Mexicans is the largest group of Hispanics in the US, followed by Puerto Ricans, Salvadorians, Dominicans, and Cubans. We have, of course, many other Hispanic groups represented in the States with significant numbers, but at large, these are our biggest representation from Latin America. I also have to emphasize, when you think about Mexico, you cannot think of Mexico as one single, everybody is the same Mexican situation. You cannot compare a person from Baja California, like myself, to somebody from Guadalajara, somebody from Oaxaca, somebody from Veracruz. We have so many variations, not just in our foods, but the way we conduct ourselves and the life exposures that we have. So it's incredibly important to be mindful and understanding of that. Dr. Neeson also did emphasize the fact that given the current political climate, there is this assumption that Latin America is essentially invading the US. There's a lot of immigration, and the reality is, no. For the majority of the Hispanic people in the US, they have been here for many years. Decades, if not more. And I always like to say that there is a lot of people in the States from Hispanic background who did not cross the border. The border crossed them. That is the case of, let me see, how do I advance my slide? Thank you. So that is the case of the people of New Mexico, and like New Mexico, California, Arizona, Texas, Florida. These are places that at some point were part of what is now Mexico. And the people, I'm going to refer specifically to the people of New Mexico, although I now have the California experience. The people of New Mexico is a very, very, very interesting group of individuals. Did I lose my slides?
No, we can see them.
So in New Mexico, I did my cardiovascular training, and I was exposed to patients who were presenting with cardiovascular disease. One of the things that really drove my attention to the patient population is that I was seeing patients that were coming in with very severe advanced cardiovascular disease, not only coronary artery disease, but peripheral vascular disease that seemed to be in very late stages. This is not the disease that you can fix, treat, and then let them go. This were people who were likely to die very young. They were presenting in their 40s and 50s compared to others who were presenting in their 60s and 70s, as one should expect. One of the things that also made me pay more attention to this was the fact that a lot of the Hispanics that I was seeing in New Mexico were had limited resources. So my slides for some reason are advancing. I don't think I'm doing it, but I want to try to go back to my previous slide. I apologize about that. For some reason, it's not letting me go back there. Okay, so one of the things that was very important for me is that In cardiovascular medicine, as some of you may know, we do have tons of therapies. And with the advancements of therapies, the cost of therapy is not insignificant. So a lot of my patients were not going to be able to afford a lot of the drugs that we knew were going to be beneficial to them. So I decided to dig into the data to find out what do we know about the Hispanic population and the benefit of all these medications. Do they actually benefit from the combination of medications that we are going to prescribe them and they might not take? So when I looked up that information, there wasn't a whole lot of information to back up benefit of guideline-directed medical therapy for coronary artery disease or heart failure in patients from a Hispanic background. So that led me to run into the Hispanic paradox that I will discuss a little bit more in the next slide. But before I leave the New Mexico experience, we had seen on a previous slide that Hispanics in New Mexico had similar mortality to the rest of the US. So while I was in New Mexico, I had a working theory that the Hispanic population in New Mexico could be the projection of what the Hispanic population in the rest of the states could look like a few hundred years down the road. You have to remember that the people in New Mexico, it's more or less a representation of the people from Mexico. Not exactly, they are unique, is a region that was inhabited and remains inhabited by a large number of Native American people. We have tons of Native American groups. We have the Navajo, the Pueblo, the Apache, all surrounding New Mexico. We have the influence of the Spanish people, and we have and maintain some of the Mexican traditions. But again, they've also been there for over 500 years. And that's where I began to think that perhaps that time of exposure could be leading them to higher risk for cardiovascular disease. So the Hispanic paradox was first observed in cardiovascular medicine, because what we notice is that even though Hispanics have higher rates of obesity and diabetes, their mortality seemed to be lower. And I apologize for my challenges with my slides here. Angie, are you able? Yeah, thank you. Now, because of these challenges, I'm going to go to the next slide. The data that had been available for years was showing mixed information. So some of the data, like the one that was presented by Dr. Nielsen, suggested that, yes, mortality was lower for Hispanics in general, but when you break it down by Hispanic group, there was mixed information. So while mortality might be low when compared to whites, some Hispanic groups compared to other Hispanic groups had actually higher mortalities. So again, talking about that diversity that exists within groups and that risk of assuming that we are all similar and that we all carry the same risk. So in order to try to have a better understanding on the Hispanic paradox, the Hispanic Community Health Study, or Study of Latinos, was born. So this study, if I can go to my next slide. I just wanted to give an example of how there was more or less lack of data for other Hispanic groups. We do have and had data for Mexican Americans, but other groups may not have been represented in the data. And then on the next slide, I wanted to give you information about the Hispanic Community Health Study, or Study of Latinos. This is a very important study. I usually refer to this study as the Framingham for the Hispanic population. So this is a prospective cohort study that is looking at Latinos from various regions in the United States. We have people from San Diego, New York, Chicago, Miami. So some of the big centers that will have individuals from various Latin American backgrounds. There were 16,000 participants included in this study, and we have been able to follow them for about 11 years now. So what have we learned from here? And I'm just going to go directly to talking about mortality. So when it comes to mortality, what we have learned is precisely that. It's not the same for all of us. So again, while Hispanics in general may have lower mortality, when we look at individuals from specific backgrounds, the mortality is not the same. So what we have seen thus far is that men in particular, but men and women from Cuban background seem to have a higher mortality compared to other groups, followed by Puerto Rican men. What we also saw was that after the pandemic, the cumulative mortality risk for Hispanic increased by a twofold, which is similar to what Dr. Nielsen has already presented. In general, the point of showing this is sort of to create a little bit of consciousness to the fact that, yes, as a whole, as a group, as a Hispanic large cohort per se, our mortality might be lower compared to white, but you have to look deeper. There is more to this. Now, the big question is, what is driving the mortality benefit? So, and that is a question that remains under investigation. So, despite all of my struggles, I managed to get through my slides. I'm going to summarize what I really wanted to deliver and have everybody take away from here. The big thing is, think of Latinos and Hispanics in the US, Latino Hispanics, however we want to identify ourselves as. Remember that we are not just one group of people. There's quite a bit of diversity. There's a lot of different experiences from our just life, how much time we've spent in the US, where in the US we've lived, what kind of access we may have, etc. When it comes to the Hispanic paradox may not be true or equal for all Hispanics, and mortality will be variable depending on the group. Furthermore, we believe that, at least in the Hispanic Community Health Study, the investigative group, we believe that the benefit associated with being Hispanic is related to resilience, but trying to define resilience is incredibly challenging. And it will require quite a bit of work in order to try to really gain an understanding of what resilience, what part of the culture leads to this resilience that is currently observed. Now, something else, and this is something that I referred to when it comes to New Mexico, was the idea that acculturation could be driving the increased risk in cardiovascular disease in the Hispanic population. However, the measurement of acculturation is also a challenge, so it's something that we have to work on learning about a little bit better. And so I hope this makes sense for all of you. I have to admit that it was challenging to stay focused on the discussion with the jumping slides. But with everything that I've said, I really want to pass things on to Dr. Graham, who's going to talk to us about food and food access. And we're going to begin with more exciting topics here.
I don't know if it's going to be more exciting, but mi gente, man, I thought this is going to be sort of a high-level CME. This is what we call a let's keep it real CME. So let's keep it real. My name is Dr. Robert Graham, commonly known as Dr. Rob the Chef. It is a true honor to be with all of you today and share some of my thoughts. Who is speeding the slides? Because that's an interesting concept here. So now I'm feeling you, Sonia, Dr. Sonia here. So I am driven by this sort of principle. Shall I drive or should you guys drive? I'm in New York, so I don't drive a lot, but if you want me to drive, I can drive. Okay.
I'm gonna give you control. Hold on.
All right.
Oh, actually, I'm not sure if I can. Or you could just tell me when you want me to.
Let me see. Am I taking control now?
I think you should be able to, but if not,
Well,
I can advance.
Are you guys seeing my slides or no?
I'm seeing the slides, but I think you're still not controlling.
Okay. How about now?
Nope. It's okay. Just tell me when to.
Okay. So I'm always so just I'll give you guys a little bit of background. So and I'll share a little bit of my lived experience of how I got to this game. But I love this quote by Wendell Berry. People are fed by the food industry which pays no attention to health and are treated by a health industry which pays no attention to food. I heard this quote first probably in 2003 when I was obtaining my MPH. I focused my MPH on clinical epidemiology and clinical nutrition, but my focus was in complementary alternative medicine use among the Latino population. And what we found very early on is that depending on what you ask and who you ask, the questions to, the answers will be different. Well, early part of my career, I was really focused on integrative and complementary alternative medicine. And we quickly found out this, that if you ask Latinos, do you use what herbs you use most commonly? Don't ask them if they use sort of the white sort of Anglo herbs. If you ask a Latino, do you have an aloe plant in your house? They probably say yes. So the surveys that we ask of us are also sort of non-culturally competent or concordant. And what I mean by that is this. We are fed a sad American diet, right? And as you can see here, I spent a lot of my time early in my career in research and in clinical medicine, but roughly 15 years ago, I started this movement called culinary medicine. I know Angie will be speaking about this later on in our topics, but the reason why I did that is because I think if we go back to our roots and understand how our parents, our mothers, fathers, abuelas, abuelos, our community elders fed us, we won't never get into this problem ever again. And I think part of the resiliency of us is sticking to our roots. And so as you can see here, 60%, over 60% of our diet it comes from processed foods. Processed foods, there's a lot of questions about it recently. And if you've been following the data in terms of defining what a processed food or an ultra processed food is, ultimately, I like to say this: if it comes in a box, don't eat it. If it comes from a plant, eat it. If it's made in a plant, don't eat it. That's the difference between processed and unprocessed. And this is hard for us to understand, right? Because when we think about what is a healthy diet, the USDA puts this My Plate. And the idea of a My Plate is half of it should be fruits and vegetables, grains, and a little bit of protein. But I'm going to share with you a bunch of slides of foods. And I want you to think about how you would define this as healthy or not, depending on this slide here, the My Plate. Okay, so healthy or not? 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 By the way, these are all foods I've made. They look good, delicious. Healthy or not? And so my point about this sort of last couple of slides is that it's very hard to determine if it's healthy or not if we define it as My Plate. Healthy or not? And so for me, if I can play this video, this is what I call healthy food. Am I able to do this, you think? Oh, let's see. Can you guys see the video?
No, I don't think. No, I can't. This one? Mm-mm. I think you just downloaded the slide. I don't think it's a video.
Let me pause it. Can you hear that video or not?
No.
It's okay. All right, I'm just going to skip the video then. Basically, the point of that video is from the movie Ratatouille. And if you remember Ratatouille, there was a critic that came into this restaurant, and he was sort of a tough critic. And he wanted to sort of reconnect with the food that they were making in this fresh restaurant. And it wasn't until he tasted Ratatouille that transported him back to his mother's kitchen. And I think if we think about how our parents cooked for us, or continue to cook for us, or how we cook for our families, that is really about health. And oftentimes we hear about food as medicine, but I believe food is much more than medicine. Food is intrinsically related to our social connections and our communities. Food is culture, food is love, and food is joy. And that's part of the reason why I have traded my white lab coat for my chef whites. And roughly almost 10 years ago, it's about 10 years since I became a chef. And to Anne's point, I think one of the very few, and if only, Latino doctors that are also a trained chef. And the reason why this is my lived experience, because I have been fortunate to have been raised in a global community called Jackson Heights. And if anyone has ever been to New York City, I urge you guys to come to what we call the Village Town Square called Jackson Heights. We have over 170 communities living very synergistically and prospering in Jackson Heights. We speak a ton of languages, and there's so much that brings us together. And I think being born in a place like Jackson Heights allows us to have this diversity of thought, of feelings, and also of the culinary arts. I was born on a street called Jackson Heights on 82nd Street. I was born on top of a bodega. A bodega, this is what we call the old school bodegas, where they actually sold fruits and vegetables, not processed foods like candies and stuff like that. We also have these sort of natural healers. This is a Peruvian guy on the streets of the main street called Roosevelt Avenue on Jackson Heights. What they're doing on the streets of Jackson Heights is honoring the traditional health ways, the traditional medicines of our culture, and how to integrate into our food systems. And this is sort of a picture of my mother's witch's brew. My mom is typically known as the village curandera. And so when you get sick, you don't go to the hospital because that's called alternative medicine. What we call our medicine is what our abuelas, our mothers, or our parents do, driven by a food first approach. And this is sort of my mother's recipes. This is a little dated picture. What I found always amazing as a child, my mother used to say, tu comida es tu medicina. You know, ignore the medicines. But interestingly enough, I grew up in a dichotomous house where my father, as you can hear from my name, is an Anglo, right? And so he believed, because of his biochemistry background, that medicine is the answer, not our food. And so this is, again, a composite picture of some of the meals I've cooked with love. And I just want to sort of, I'm teasing you a little bit on this conversation today because I really wanted to focus on a bigger issue here, is that the reason why we're all here today is because we need to think about disease, we need to think about medicine differently. And if I may just share something here, is this. Is that there's a misconception, oh, sorry about these slides. There's a misconception that emphasizing Latin food means building recipes that need to be healthier. I believe that our cultural foods are inherently nourishing. And if you can see just some of these things, and I think it's really important for us to allow our patients to tell us what their daily foods are, instead of us assuming how to fill the gaps based upon my plate. That's why we have to think it differently, because ultimately our food is killing us. And what I mean by our food is sort of the American food system. It's how it's grown, it's how it's shipped, it's how it's raised, it's how it's prepared, and how it's delivered. And this is the truth. In 2003, the global study of nutrition said our diet is the #1 cause of death and disability in the United States. I was so happy that you guys already touched about the Latino paradox, and I thought you guys would. But regardless of where we are in the US and or the world, wherever our food system goes, our poor health outcomes follow anywhere between 15 to 20 years. And I believe part of that acculturation data is exactly driven by our diet, the sad standard American diet. That's why I've devoted my career to a couple of things. So this is for the young docs and people out there. These are called prescriptions. We used to write them on paper and send them to our patients. They would fill them out in our pharmacies before the adventation of electronic medical records. I used to hand these out back in the early 2000s. But I also thought about, if we're going to teach doctors how to talk to our patients about nutrition, we have to take them out of the hospitals and put them into kitchens to teach them how to cook, the birth of culinary medicine. And these are doctors cooking on Mondays to explore the benefits of a meatless Monday movement. And as you can see, these are doctors that actually are smiling and cooking. And I just want to touch a couple more points before I pass it over. Is that in New York City, we have this beautiful hospital called Latinx Hospital. This is an abandoned rooftop garden that was closed after we realized that smoking was bad for us and we shouldn't be smoking in public spaces. So we decided to sort of turn this abandoned rooftop into a thriving garden, where we actually started a movement called Rooftop to Bedside. And the idea here was that we had to talk to our hospitals to stop feeding our patients to poison that is bringing them into their hospitals for the first time. I took this a step further. I ended up taking doctors out of the cities and taking them to farms. So this is me cooking on a farm, healthy meals. And I just want to close with this. As you're hearing now, the data behind what we call the food is medicine movement, it's basically this pyramid. And I want to focus my last sort of minute or two on what I believe is the tip of the spear here, the medically tailored meal movement. I am the chief health officer for a medically tailored meal company called Performance Kitchen, where I, as the chef within the company, design meals that are culturally, ethnically appropriate. Because as we get older, right, we want to still connect to the foods that heal us. And just by cooking the foods that we think are healthy, but not appreciating the cultural humility of our society, we'll never get there. So I spend a lot of my time now in the food as medicine space. I never thought in my wildest dreams being a doctor that I have a line of meals that are culturally and ethnically appropriate. And so I just want to show you this slide. This is stuff that we sell today. Okay, these are part of our Cuban line of meals. These are medically tailored meals. I'll speak throughout the series on what a medically tailored meal is. But guys, this looks a lot better than the hospital slop they used to serve us in our hospitals. And the reason why I do this is because we're born, right, with a very high life expectancy. But unfortunately, as we age, right, our health span drops. And we can change this by how we eat, but more importantly, how we approach in our center. We believe that there's 5 ingredients in a recipe to health. And that's part of the reason why my company is called it Fresh Medicine. When it comes to food, eat more plants. We must find a way to relax for 10 minutes. We must find a way to exercise for 30 minutes a day, sleep to 7 to 8 hours a night. And when it comes to happiness, other people matter. It's not the money, the fame, it's the people you're surrounding yourself with. So in conclusion here, when it comes to our health, it starts with food. But in the end, what we truly want in life is to be happy. If you want to hear more about my story, I did a TEDx talk roughly 10 years ago, and I think it's still so appropriate. And I hope to share more of my story with you in the upcoming weeks. For now, what I'll do, I'll pass it over to my friend, Dr. Sandra.
Thank you so much, Dr. Graham. And I'm here just listening to it all and being re-inspired and invigorated. So thank you for doing what you do and inspiring the movement. And to all you colleagues who have taken the time to join us, we feel really privileged to be able to share our passion and hope that you guys carry this out into your communities. I am an endocrinologist, and I deal a lot, my passion, my focus is cardiometabolic health. And this really hammers home the importance of having these discussions with our patients, with our colleagues, about the importance of lifestyle medicine. So that last slide that Dr. Graham shared is a wonderful segue into describing a little bit more about what lifestyle medicine is. And lifestyle medicine is a discipline that has training and is very specific in what it offers. So it is an evidence-based lifestyle therapeutic intervention. Dr. Neeson is boarded in lifestyle medicine. I am boarded in lifestyle medicine. And one of the things that I quickly learned when I was studying lifestyle medicine is that this is exactly what is at the top of algorithms when we're talking about treatment of heart disease, of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, the treatment of metabolic dysfunction associated liver disease, the treatment of type 2 diabetes. And sometimes it's in fine print, and it's intentionally so difficult to see that last oval in red on the bottom. That's taken directly from the American Diabetes Association, where it says the first line of therapy for the treatment of diabetes. And then you just see there in parentheses, comprehensive lifestyle management. And then it immediately goes into the multicolor of pharmacotherapies. And sure, pharmacotherapy has a role, but why are we not stressing? Why are we not spending more time on the importance of lifestyle medicine? And maybe it's because we don't have the time to do that or the knowledge. And so here we are trying to share some of these important interventions from a lifestyle perspective, and the importance of also making it culturally relevant. So lifestyle medicine should be the first intervention when we're talking about these chronic diseases. And we get to be specific about it. And I'll share that with you in a couple of slides. Lifestyle medicine prevents, treats, and can even reverse chronic diseases. I can tell you from personal experience working with the patients I have, nothing gives me greater joy than to follow them and de-escalate medical therapy from a medication standpoint. And then also tell them, congratulations, your type 2 diabetes is now in remission. So this is something that also involves the patient, where they also feel like they have skin in the game, and they take ownership in their medical care. And it is a wonderful source of empowerment. So something that I highly involve in my medical care and encourage all of you to look into lifestyle medicine. Can I have the next slide, please, and Dr. Mason? So here are the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. And again, Dr. Graham had touched on these. So number 1, nutrition and specific, right? I said this is specific. So let's get into some of these specifics. When we're talking about nutrition, we're talking specifically about whole food, plant-based eating, where the majority of what you're getting comes from plants. It really emphasizes the importance of fiber and how fiber can be very healing in our health. So within our culture, right, we have tons of sources of high fiber foods. Fiber comes from plant. So, I think immediately about lentils, about the beans that we have, the whole grains. My family's from Peru, so quinoa, all the lentejas, and then all the vegetables, all the fruits, and the enormous variety of fruits that come from all the different regions of Latin America that get imported here to the United States. So those are the types of foods that we're really encouraging our patients to seek out, to incorporate into their meal planning. Sleep is incredibly important. And the sweet spot, studies have shown, is really trying to aim to 7 to 9 hours of sleep. I frequently discuss with my patients that we want to allow for a sleep opportunity. So sleep opportunity means trying to make sure you could potentially get 8 hours of sleep, knowing that very few of us immediately fall asleep when our head hits the pillow, and waking up when we need to wake up for our responsibilities. But allowing a sleep opportunity of at least 8 hours is really important. As an endocrinologist, I like to bring in the hormonal impacts that happen when we don't allow ourselves enough sleep. When we sleep, we are supposed to have a nadir in our cortisol levels. Cortisol is our stress hormone. If we don't allow for the appropriate amount of sleep, our cortisol levels will naturally stay high. What happens as a result? Well, cortisol is a hormone that also triggers gluconeogenesis from the liver. And so no wonder when people who may have insulin resistance or prediabetes or type 2 diabetes don't get a full night of sleep or a very unrestful sleep, they're going to have higher fasting glucose levels the following day. And we know also when we start with a higher fasting glucose, then the rest of the day makes it more difficult to keep those blood sugars in check. Sleep is very important. And I think it's important also to have the discussions with our patients. How much sleep are you getting? What time are you going to bed? And they might say, oh, I go to bed at 10, which means I get into bed at 10. But then the follow-up question is, what time do you fall asleep, right? Because sometimes people get into bed and they're scrolling on their devices, or they take a long time to get to bed. So really, we're trying to gauge that amount of time. And it can be challenging too when individuals are working multiple shifts or multiple jobs, and validating that experience with individuals, but still stressing the importance of aiming for a sufficient amount of sleep. And I think this also provides an opportunity as healthcare providers to sort of shine the light on ourselves and see if we're also getting that amount of sleep and providing an opportunity to practice what we preach. Exercise. How many times, and guilty as charged too, have we sort of just in best intentions say to the people that we're dealing with or working with, we really should try to eat healthier and exercise more. But what does exercise more mean? And so movement, constant movement is really important. If we want to go based off of studies, trying to get at least 150 minutes of the moderate physical activity, doing strength exercises at least twice a week, getting specific and writing prescriptions, just like we write prescriptions for nutrition, avoiding risky substances. So really decreasing alcohol intake, no cigarette smoking, avoiding illicit drugs. So being specific about that as well. Talking about stressors, asking individuals what stresses you out and how do you cope with those stressors, right? There can be financial, there can be professional, there can be familial stress, caring for aging parents, caring for kids, all of the above, and how do they deal with that and try to navigate how they can find healthy ways to deal with stress. And then finally, the social connection. And this is where I obviously am biased, but I think also our Latina heritage really shines, is in getting together in community, sharing in song, in dance, in food, and really offering each other that support, which is a very critical part of health. And next slide, please. I think it skipped my last slide, but here I just offer, and if you guys want to, well, you'll get a copy of the talk or screenshot this, but here are resources that are available free of charge for all of you who are healthcare providers, who work with individuals, and these are culturally relevant guides. So American College of Lifestyle Medicine even has it translated into Spanish for those who are strictly Spanish speaking, or they can take it to family members who can read it to them. Also, Full Plate Living has wonderful resources. And the Obesity Medicine Association also has, for example, different types of nutritional recommendations for healthy eating and different ethnicities that individuals can pull from. And we can provide these types of resources to our patients. And so I encourage you to look at these resources, and I am very happy to next pass the torch on to my colleague, Dr. Antonio, who is a PhD in nutritional and behavioral health, as well as a registered dietitian.
Thank you. Angie or Dr. Neeson, how much time do you want me to, so I give you guys enough time to finish at the end?
Maybe about 7 to 10 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. I'll start the clock. All right. Dr. Antonio Miranda, I have my PhD. And to tie all this together, they brought me in because I'm apparently now well known as the behavior change guy among our Latino community. So it's something that's really interesting. Anytime I give a talk is people say, well, what's your PhD? And if it's in nutrition, I tell them my PhD is in the macho man syndrome. So I studied Mexicanos, rancheros from Mexico that came here to the United States, low literacy, elementary school, all of the stereotypes. And actually probably my proudest moment from my PhD was that in 2021, the Spanish dictionary published the word valemadrismo, but in 2020, we published the word valemadrismo scientifically in the scientific literature, thanks to these interviews. So really, my research has been in understanding a specific niche, right? Because I call it Hispanic heterogeneity, right? We're a heterogeneous group, as we've been saying. But I have a profound passion, just like everybody here, Dr. Graham, Dr. Neeson, everybody here. I think the ultimate takeaway is that we care so much about the population. And Dr. Neeson, can you play that video? I'm not sure if it'll let you. You can mute it. If not, that's okay. You can put the volume down if you want. But for any of you who are interested in really understanding the Mexicano cultura, if it doesn't work, that's okay. But there's a song called La Casita by the banda MS. And the reason that I care so much about this population, just like everybody else here, is that we're trying to help people to improve the food system, to improve medical infrastructure, because we have it made. We're Latinos that have worked so hard, but we're at the upper echelon of socioeconomic status. But all of us care so much about our abuelos, our mama, our papa, people who came over from Mexico and that are literally the people that build the hospitals that are $500 million that we work in, that build the universities that we're researchers in, the people that keep the streets clean, the people that clean our hospitals, our schools, and all of that. So it's really good to be here with all of you and with such a passionate group. So to ultimately bring us back to what the purpose of today's presentation is to give us all ánimo, but also to understand the myths and misconceptions of our cultura. Dr. Neeson, if you want to go to the next slide. So I'll expand more on my publications in the upcoming sessions and seminars. There's a bit of a lag. There we are. So here are some common misconceptions that I'm a registered dietitian, but you guys as MDs, as PAs, everybody that's here, anybody in the healthcare system, you're going to see a lot of these things, right? A lot of our patients will say, el doctor es el matasanos, o nomás nos quieren quitar el dinero, o a mí me vale, ese que vas a saber. So here I've summarized so we can get a snapshot of the behavioral and the psychological perspective of many of our patients. So pre-diabetes to us, A1C 5.7 to 6.4. What about the people that only went to elementary school? What does a percentage mean to them, right? What does 6.5 A1C mean? No vale nada, right? Les vale madre. Well, not to everybody, but we have to really humble ourselves. And that's why I love research and what everybody's doing here and reaching out, because if we put our boots on the ground and learn from our population, then we'll be able to raise them up too. So, prediabetes, yo no sé ni qué es. That's what you're going to hear. So some culturally relevant responses and ideas for you guys. Es un aviso del cuerpo. What I tell my patients, or if in English for the non-Spanish speakers, is I'm an interpreter for what your body's telling us. Yo nomás soy el mecánico. Es su cuerpo, es su carro, puede ser lo que guste, pero yo nomás le estoy diciendo que el check engine light se le prendió. Y pues ahí si usted quiere hacer algo, aquí estoy para ayudarle. So really building those bridges, that's one of my favorite things to do and to share on. Yo no siento nada. I don't feel sick. They don't know that hyperglycemia for an extended period of time, you don't feel it anymore. Blood pressure, you don't feel it once you've been working, right? Once te estás partiendo, you know what, because you're such a hard worker. All of us are hard workers here. So again, the car analogy, your check engine light is on. And I share this, and the reason I did this research is because people like my papa, he picks up the garbage that of the community, and many of your parents and our grandparents were the braceros that came here, were the mamas and the incredible workers out there. So really, over the next few sessions, we're going to get more in depth on all of this. But diabetes, a common misconception, oh, pues ya valió, right? Ya valió diabetes, ya me van a mochar el pie, ya es diálisis. Or the next one, another misconception is insulin resistance. It's not what we view, right? It's not the insulin receptor. It's that Hispanics are insulin resistant, that we're very resistant. Pues ya cuando mi tío tomó insulina, ya le mocharon el pie. When it's actually the opposite. Si hubiéramos empezado insulina antes, si hubiéramos comido como en el rancho antes, eso nos ayuda a evitar. La diabetes no es un death sentence. La diabetes es algo, es un aviso que podemos manejar, and it actually can make us healthier in the long run if we take the right approach. And then the one that matters to many of you guys, right? And even for me, because they see a guy that speaks Spanish in the hospital, like, oh, el doctor. And I'm like, well, doctor, profesor, not really médico, but anybody who's in healthcare, a doctor is a matasanos, right? Especially in the low literacy communities, especially in the low income, from the rancho. And the last slide real quick, I can cover it in a minute, just to show us how to break that misconception as being matasanos. Here are some best practices on how to engage our Hispanic patients. Is build cultural confidence. That's step number one, right? Este sí sabe mi cultura. That's the goal. That's, you want a patient, right? I even had a patient today. I have a suit on. I only wear a suit when I'm going to give a presentation. And, you know, she had a bit of a machista husband and she wasn't making eye contact. And guess what? I took my suit off, just wore my collared shirt, and immediately her demeanor felt less intimidated. So sometimes just wearing jeans and a t-shirt while in the clinic, that can help break down that authoritarian fear. So build that cultural confidence. Mis papás son del rancho. Mi abuelita, mi abuelos trabajaron en la ciudad en Mexico, right? And then the second one is be frank, be honest. People love when you're a real person. I think Dr. Rob, what did you say, Dr. Rob? We're having a real talk CME. People want real talk appointments also. So that was a great, I'm going to keep that one in my back pocket. And then the last thing is empower and simplify. We could talk medical nutrition and all these complex ideas, but at the end of the day, right, what I always say, like, as dietitians, we've been doing that for decades, and I never want my patient to leave overwhelmed. They learned all this stuff, but at the end of the day, oiga, corte una tortilla menos en el lonche, más nopalitos, una protein shake if you want. Just simplify it for them. Small goals, and you'll see them again. Send them out, refer them out to psychologists, dietitians, all that. And the last thing, my bit of advice as a behavior person here is have ánimo, right? People don't pay just because you're the smartest person in the room. They pay because you have ánimo. They pay because you understand them. So empower, 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 and help the individual overcome the environment. Everybody can do that. So sorry to go a little bit too fast, but hopefully that was enough there. And I'll throw it back to Dr. Neeson.
That was awesome. I couldn't, as someone who practices wellness, I always think we have to nourish ourselves first, and we have to protect our ánimo so that we can be there for our patients or our family members as well. So we're kind of going to close this out with a taste of Latin American heritage. And I started off, this is Old Ways. For those of you who don't know, Old Ways is a nonprofit that came together. They have a Latino, and actually Dr. Rob is on the board of the Latino American Heritage Council for them. And they basically brought together this curriculum that's translated in both Spanish and English. And I love the way that it starts off, because it starts off as just herbs and spices. So, I remember my abuelita growing stuff in her garden, hierbabuena. We always had herbs, always had them in the spices that would always just show up. It was never about salt, it was never really about salt. It was herbs and spices. That's what gave everything flavor. And what I love about herbs and spices is that they are the antioxidants that I think a lot of us need. They are the things that can differentiate between making something super bland to making it really flavorful, but also adding that component of fiber, antioxidants, phytonutrients. And many of the diseases that we suffer from today, like diabetes, heart disease, obesity, these, if we just go back to our heritage, our traditional foods, and kind of embrace that and unlock that key that our grandparents had or our ancestors had, we really wouldn't see a lot of the rise of chronic diseases. So we all have this heritage in us that is worth reclaiming. And I often say, part of the fight that our ancestors came to this country for was really to have a better life. And now for us, it's part of our heritage to really unlock it and keep it. And we can do it through food. So, throw in the chat which one's your best favorite spice. I always like to have a combination of different ones. I like to throw cilantro and mint together. My kid loves growing mint because it's like a weed. But, we add our frijoles, we add our cumin, we add our spices in there. So this allows us to have a decreased amount of salt in our diet. And that's important for blood pressure. That's important for why? Because blood pressure leads to heart attacks, strokes, Alzheimer's, vascular dementias. So again, if you just add more herbs and spices, you're already making a better addition to your food. So I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Sandra Indocochea Sobel. She is going to demo the chimichurri. So if somebody can spotlight her.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. So it's my grand pleasure. I am actually in my office. So this is part of my medical office. I have a teaching kitchen. So in practicing what I preach, I like to empower my patients by doing real-time cooking demos with them. And so this is the small space that we share. And I am so honored to share it with all of you. I saw some people putting in their favorite spices. I saw someone say add garlic to everything, 1000%. For me, I love cilantro, and being Peruvian, rocoto, ají limo, you cannot add enough fire to a dish. So that definitely has to be part of it. But let's get into the chimichurri recipe. I love this because as far as this whole food plant-based eating, being able to see the ingredients that you're adding to your foods is so important. So this is a wonderful recipe. We take a bunch of parsley, perejil. So rinse this. I've already taken this off the stems, but just to do a couple more, we're going to take the parsley off the stems. We don't want to keep the stems in. That would make it too bitter when we're making the chimichurri sauce. my family, my whole family and I, we traveled to Argentina this past December. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful country. The food was delicious. So chimichurri, we had plenty of that. With the parsley leaves, now you just need coarse chopping of the leaves. I already chopped this mound that you see on the chopping board. So I'm gonna add that. All right, I'm gonna add this to the blender here. I'm gonna do that. Part of the recipe, you'll see once you get it, it states to take half a head of garlic. And whenever I see whatever the recommended allotment of garlic is, I'm like, yeah, that's a suggestion. I'm gonna do more than that. So I took 3/4 already, but you know, let's add another clove, why not? So add the garlic. Now, with this recipe, you can either blend it, which is what I'm gonna do with you guys, or you could just finely mince everything, your parsley, your garlic. So this is just a rough chop since we're gonna be blending it in the blender, and adding that here. If you finely mince your garlic, if you finely mince your parsley, then no need to blend it, and you'll whisk it in a bowl together to put everything together. So here we go. We have that. Next is to take 1 tablespoon of dried oregano, which is right over here. So I'm going to take out my measuring spoon here. I'm going to add the tablespoon in. Excellent. Next is 1 teaspoon of crushed red pepper. And here's the wonderful thing too about recipes, and something I like to drive home when I'm working with patients is if you see an ingredient that you're not a big fan of and you know this already, then omit it, add something else. If you don't like as much spice, then you can take down the heat. Again, heat is in my DNA, so I love adding a little bit of kick to things, but you can totally omit the red pepper if that's something that's not in your flavor profile. No big deal. So that was 1 teaspoon, half a cup of red wine vinegar. So that's what we're going to put here. I've already measured that out here. I'm going to add that. And then olive oil. Aceite de olivo lo vamos a poner acá. So here, half a cup. And that goes here too. And the last is salt and pepper to taste. And so if some people are following a low salt diet and prefer not to add any salt, that's fine. If you want to add a little bit, we're going to do that. Good. And ground black pepper, add that here. All right. Next, I'm going to maneuver this. I realize that my camera is showing my blender. I will turn it ever so slightly so I can do so. All right. And then with all the ingredients added, we're just going to pulse. Okay. To be super fine, because that's one of the brilliant things about chimichurri. I'm going to go here and now pour it into a bowl, which I'll hold up in a little bit so you can see it in its final. Whisk, whisk, whisk. Voila. Here we have our chimichurri. This is excellent. And you'll see recommendations on top of potatoes with tortilla chips. You can obviously put it on top of your fish, on top of your chicken. I think, Dr. Neeson, you also made some. I don't know if you want to show what you made at home.
I went ahead and went to my garden and I blended as many as I could. So you can kind of spotlight over here too. And I'm saving all my jars. My husband laughs at me because I save, you know, like a good Mexicana and Latina, we save everything, right? So this is, I save all my jars, and this is why, because, so I'm going to put in my chimichurri. All right. And then you know, it doesn't make me less Latina if I use my Instapot, right? Okay. I know they're not frijoles a la olla, but whatever. This is modern preparation. I still make it happen. They're still delicious. My kids still love them. And then I just grab my beans from the Instapot and I leave them marinating. You know, I think a lot of times we forget about beans. They're a blank canvas, right? White beans are blank canvas, beans are blank canvas. They have a lot of flavor, but they can also absorb a lot of flavor. So I often like these and I leave them marinating and then I put them in the fridge. And then when you want to add it on salad or a sandwich or anything, you just have your marinated, flavorful, packed protein, fiber-filled beans. So that's sort of my take on that. But thank you everyone for joining. We are out of time. And I just want to make sure that I tell everybody that there will be some surveys that will be going out. If you can please fill them out so that we can improve our next 5 sessions, that would be wonderful. I really appreciate everybody's support. At the next one, if you can tell 3 or more friends to come and join. And if you learned anything today, just put it in the chat. We'll be here for another minute. I appreciate everybody. Yep, and Janice just sent in the next session if you haven't registered. Oh, there was a question on tofu. Okay, no, tofu is a good, why is it a no-go? Who said no-go? No, it's a plant-based protein. So soybeans are plants. Is it because it comes from a box? No, that's, okay. We will get into that when we get into the 3rd section on pulses and whole grains.
There are exceptions to every rule.
Yes, exactly. I always say everything, there's no such thing as good foods or bad foods. It's always compared to what, right? So we're looking at things as a whole lifetime of how you eat. And so, you know, there's still room for the junk foods that I know are prevalent in our everyday system and our health system and our food system, but it's not every day that we get to eat them and we shouldn't eat them. So we should just be at that mindful awareness. Okay, anything else? Awesome. Okay, you can go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.